Now, to understand why that does have such huge implications, I have to start with this stuff here. We have to answer a very basic question, which is, what's money? Now, I don't care what your money looks like. I don't care what country you live in. I don't care what pictures you have on it. I don't care what color it is. I don't care what anti-counterfeiting measures you have. All money in the world today shares one common characteristic. And that characteristic is that all money is loaned into existence. Now, I don't have time to go into that in this presentation, but if you go to the crash course online, you'll see that I spend about 20 minutes going through this particular statement because it's that important. But this statement, I didn't make it up. This actually is a full direct quote off the Federal Reserve website. So go to the full crash course and look at it and see what this means, but this has huge implications. And what does it mean when we say all money is loaned into existence? Well, it's an important enough statement that I call it one of the key concepts in the larger crash course. And it has this implication. It means that at any moment in time, there is always more debt in our society, in our system, than there is money. Well, why should that be true? Well, let's take it all the way back to the very first moment. There's no money in the world. I need $1,000. One of you out there is a banker, and so you agree to loan me $1,000. So you do. I now have $1,000 because that money was just loaned into existence. And I take that and I can do wonderful things with it, right? But what happens in a month when I have to pay that $1,000 back? Well, what do we know about loans? The principal component, and they have that interest component. So I go to pay back my loan, and it's now $1,000 plus interest. Where does that money come from? It doesn't exist. So now you have to loan me the money to pay back the interest. And we do that again and again and again, and eventually you end up with this statement here, which is that there's always more debt than money in the system. So if you don't bond well with the theory on that, here's some data. In the United States today, there are $52 trillion of total debt in our system. That's about $14 trillion of money. 52 trillion of debt, 14 trillion of money. It's clear that you couldn't actually take all the money and pay back all the debts. It wouldn't be possible. There's just not enough. And so this has profound implications because what it means is that perpetual growth then is a requirement of our money system, of our banking system, by extension our economy. So when we say our economy needs to grow, what we're really saying is that it likes to grow. Our economy does not do well when it's not growing. In fact, it's so well embedded in our terminology that I invite you to look. As you read the newspapers, you will see this term. Economists will actually say, last year the world economy experienced negative growth. Because we don't actually have words for the opposite. We talk about growth always. And there's a really interesting thing that comes out when you have constantly growing debts. And that's what we have, and we've had them for quite a while. So when we think about how all money is created from debt, we find, I made this statement that there's always more debt than money in any given society. And so this problem is a predicament, however we want to phrase that, there is a lot of debt floating around out there. It's a global phenomenon. So what we're looking at in this chart, we see Spain all the way on the left, and we go to Italy and Germany and the UK, the EU, US, France, and Greece. There's two bars in there. There's the blue bars, those little tiny ones across the bottom. Those bars are the ones that we read about in the newspaper all the time when they say, the United States debt to GDP is not that bad compared to Japan. The green bars, though, are the ones that include all of the liabilities of a country. So in the United States and in the UK, those things happen to be things like pensions, entitlement programs, other liabilities. And so if we look at this chart here, what we'll see is that instead of having debt to GDP that's close to maybe, 100%, we see numbers that are over 500%. We see that the United States and the United Kingdom and other countries, instead of being ahead of the pack, are actually right in the middle of the pack. So when we look at this figure here and we see those kinds of numbers, we don't have any historical examples anywhere where countries got to this level of indebtedness and were able to get out of that problem by either growing their way out of it or doing anything other than printing or in some way entering a form of default onto that debt. So we're really in brand new territory. That's why this is really important information. So when I look at all this debt that's sitting in all the world economies, I can sum up what an economy is in just two words. An economy must grow. That's what it must do. So when we take this first E, instead of thinking economy, I want you to think of something that must grow. And by must, it's not a law. I'm saying must as in Think about 2009. We experienced roughly minus 2% shrinkage or negative growth in the world economy, and it felt like the wheels were falling off. Plus 2% growth, we wouldn't be here having this conversation with the same level of urgency. People would be saying, oh, that worked out fine. So when I say it must grow, I'm saying it's really quite unhappy when it's not growing, and it's pretty much okay as long as it's growing. And it's not by that much. A couple percent here or there makes all the difference in the world. And so why should that be? And what can we connect that to? Well, I need to talk about this stuff called exponential growth at this point in time. And this is a very special type of growth. And by exponential growth, I'm talking about something that looks like a hockey stick if we charted it, right? We're looking at an amount of something over time on this chart. So amount on the vertical axis, time across the bottom. And in this particular example, we're actually looking at a chart of something that you should be pretty familiar with. This happens to be a chart of population. The green part is history. The red part are UN projections for the next 40 years. And we have to chart this over a few thousand years because human population has been growing at about 1.25%, sometimes 1.5%. It hasn't been growing all that fast. But we'll see two parts in this chart, right? We've got this long, flat part, and then we turn a corner, and all of a sudden, it has a steep part. Now, for anybody who's actually a mathematician, you'll realize that I'm actually pulling a fast one on people. Because if I fiddle with that axis, the left axis, I can make this hockey stick turn a corner anywhere I want. It's a trick, right? So if I made this, instead of going to 12 billion, if I made it go to 1 billion, this looks like it makes a pretty vicious hockey stick in about 1910. So we're dressed very differently, and I'm trying to scare you back in 1910 with some alarming data, right? Or if I made the left axis go to trillions, we don't even see any curve at all. It just looks like a flat line. So what's with this trick then? Well, it's not a trick if you can fix the left axis. Now, what if somebody came along, scientists said, well, we've added up all the water, all the soil, all the possibilities for growing food. We've done that, and we've decided that there's a physical cap on the number of people that can fit on the surface of the planet. Okay, now it really matters where the bend in that elbow is, and it entirely matters where you are on this particular curve. Being on the flat spot versus being on the steep spot, entirely different experience. I have this cap sitting here at somewhere between 9 and 11 billion, but there are scientists who think that all that's going to be available post-oil will be something closer to maybe 1 to 2 billion. So we have an interesting cap here that we can put on. So how can we understand this a little bit better? What else can we look at? Well, here's a chart of oil. So this is the amount of oil that's been produced. And we see, again, it has a flat spot, and then we turn a corner, and then we've got this steep spot. And I'm going to put a cap on this because we have very reliable information as to the total amount of oil as a rate that we'll be able to pull out of the earth. We are either at that rate currently or we're within a few years, depending on who you listen to. But we're close. We're not 40 years away anymore. We're maybe 4 years away. A blink of an economic eye. It's upon us, potentially. So this, where we happen to be on this curve, again, extremely important. And I can show you hundreds of charts, all of which are not showing you linear behavior. They're showing you exponential behavior, nonlinear behavior. They look like hockey sticks, ranging from environmental things that I have listed here, but I could be showing you number of Krispy Kreme donuts sold, number of cars on the road. I could be showing you lumber produced for houses. All of the charts look the same. So, point being, you don't live in a linear world. You live in a world that's denominated and dominated by these curves. So what does that mean? I mean, how can we understand that? The thing about being a human is we think linearly. That's how evolution designed us. We don't think exponentially.